right, here we go, guys. Hey, I see I've got Erik on and I've got Jeff.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Really good.
Doing all right. Trying to stay cool here. I think I saw an egg frying on the sidewalk earlier today.
I've got 250 yards of fill dirt in my front yard. You want to come help me lay it out?
There you go.
Well, that sounds like a good way to stay cool.
Right. Oh, man.
All right, great. All right, well, I think we're getting there, and people should be all in the room with their popcorn ready to go here.
That's what I forgot. I forgot to grab popcorn.
That's going to be entertaining nevertheless, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, hey, looks like it's about time here. So let's go ahead and get started with our meetup today. I'd like to welcome everybody out there in the internet land. Today, welcome to the Future of Data meetup. This is going to be our first meetup focused solely on CDP on Azure. I'm Chris Van Dyke. I'm a principal solutions engineer at Cloudera. I've been with Cloudera close to 4 years, and before that, I was actually back at the mothership at Microsoft. And from a personal side, I'm a big home lab geek, and I love in the summers to get my Jeep and leave Texas and jump up into the mountains up near Erik and climb those mountains. So this meetup's going to be in live stream today on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And I've got a couple guests here with me today. Let's go ahead and do some introductions. First, we've got my friend from Microsoft, Jeff. Go ahead and Jeff, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Chris, and thanks for bringing me on. My name's Jeff King, and I work at Microsoft. I'm a program manager in Azure Storage, primarily focusing on Azure Data Lake storage, so basically in the analytics space. A little bit of background on me. I've been at Microsoft coming up on 13 years. I've started as a consultant, and out there in the field, working with customers one-on-one, rolling up my sleeves and putting stuff together and building solutions. I've had many different roles within Microsoft, and now I'm in product group helping to sort of shape our analytics platform for customers. And in my spare time, that's non-existent, but we'll just say the weekends. Currently, I'm doing a lot of property restoration on my on our property here. Bought a farm a couple of years ago, and so we're putting things are slowly coming around. But like you, Chris, I'm an overlanding geek. I don't have a Jeep. I've got a heavily modified Taco that I've taken cross country and just do all sorts of crazy things with it. So anyway, great to be a part of it, guys.
Awesome. And then also here from Cloudera, I have one of my colleagues, Erik Maxwell. Erik?
Yeah, hey guys, nice to be here. Erik Maxwell. I'm a principal solutions engineer at Cloudera. One of the areas that I focused on throughout my time at Cloudera and Hortonworks before the merger has been security. So going to take you through some security stuff today. But on a more personal note for me, when I'm not steeped in the technology at Cloudera and working on my computers at home, I like to go out and race some motorcycles. So got a couple of sport bikes that I take out to the track and try to go as fast as I can. So,
nice.
Very
so anyway,
good.
Chris, shall we get this thing rolling?
Yeah, let's get it rolling. Okay, so for everybody out there, questions today, we will be monitoring your questions. So whatever platform you're watching us in, please post questions, and they will be answered either in the chat or at the end when we do the Q&A. And speaking of Q&A, one of the things we want to do is have everybody active and participate if they can. So we will be doing a raffle and prizes close to the end. On the right side of me, you can see the prizes. We've got a first place and a second place swag prize pack. So everybody who participates in the chat will be entered into the drawing. Ask early and ask often questions. And you must be present at the end to win. And okay, and now on to the presentation. I'll be the one kicking it off with our first little presentation here, but as an overview of what we're going to be doing today, for today's agenda, we'll be discussing first the nuts and bolts of how we deliver CDP, or the Cloudera Data Platform, on Azure as a platform service. Then you're going to get to hear from Jeff at Microsoft on a little more about ADLS and Azure Storage. And then finally, you're going to see how we've been working with Microsoft to extend the capabilities of ADLS to include fine-grained access controls. So as a quick primer for those out there that maybe you haven't seen CDP, or you're not aware of the, you might be on CDH or HDP and haven't seen the new version of our platform. The Cloudera Data Platform is an end-to-end platform that allows you to collect data with streaming and data flow, curate that data with data engineering, report using your self-service BI tools, and allowing those to connect to our data warehouse. Next, you can serve that data up with operational database. And then finally, it provides a workspace for team data science using Cloudera machine learning. And what's cool is underneath all of this is Cloudera Shared Data Experience. That provides the enterprise capabilities needed for data security, governance, lineage, management, and automation. Then CDP has been re-architected for the cloud. And when I say that, what I mean is what we've done is we've separated compute from storage. This allows us and our customers to leverage economical cloud-based object storage like ADLS and Azure. And it also allows us to support different types of compute and allow you to spin up and spin down compute. And now, being able to do this in the cloud, we're able to leverage that containerized compute. And what that allows our customers to do is it allows them to have more flexibility with their IT spend. By using containerized compute and that cloud object storage, you only spend for what you consume. And then the next thing is, how do we deliver this as a PaaS service within Azure? First, there's a couple prereqs, and this is really the only time you really have to think about the infrastructure side of Azure. The first thing you've got to do is, in order for our management plane to connect to your subscription and start provisioning the things needed for the CDP PaaS service, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to create an Azure AD application registration. And we use that, our control plane uses that to communicate back in. And the roles you would give that is you'd give that contributor either at the subscription level or at the resource group level. And then the next thing you'd have to do is we have to have a place to go and bring this into Azure and into your subscription. So at that point, what we need is we'll have to provision a resource group along with ADLS Gen 2 storage, a VNet for the networking for the service, and then finally to be able to apply roles on the different compute that we spin up. There's a set of managed identities that we spin up within that resource group. And then from the highest level, what this looks like in the end, if you look here on the left where it says Cloudera Cloud, this is our management plane, and we're delivering that as a SaaS service. Within the management plane, you have things like the data catalog, replication manager, identity management, orchestration and monitoring services, and then the APIs for the control plane. That is going to then communicate, or that's then going to communicate into the your Azure subscription and that resource group that you create in your Azure subscription. And in there, we're going to provision things like free IPA services for identity, the SDF, the Shared Data Experience data lake. Those are going to be leveraging virtual machines and ADLS Gen 2 storage within Azure, along with Azure Postgres. Then from a compute standpoint, we've also got traditional data hubs. So when I talk about that, that's going to be those more VM-based compute experiences. that are going to be templatized, and I'll show that in a bit. That's also leveraging ADLS Gen 2 storage. And then for these new style experiences that we have, the self-service that can spin up and spin down as needed, like data warehouse, machine learning, and data engineering, those are all going to leverage Azure Kubernetes services and ADLS Gen 2 storage. So now we'll jump over, and we're going to jump over into my demo. And what I want to really show you today and kind of get across to you today is the CDP being deployed in Azure is a PaaS service. You're not having to go and mess with any infrastructure. The management plane is going and handling a lot of that for you. So now what you can see is you can see that I'm in my Cloudera Management Console. I have all the different environments that are available to me across my different cloud subscriptions. I'm going to jump into one of mine, and that's this environment that's in Azure. And the first thing I'm going to look at is the data lake. The data lake is where the storage part of the equation is for us. If I go and look down at my resources here, you can see that I've got cloud storage listed, and I've got a set of ABFS endpoints that are out there. And that's all that customer data is sitting in Azure Storage. The other bit to this is on top of the Azure Storage or the ADLS Gen 2, we're also layering the Cloudera Shared Data Experience. With that brings things like schema management, and I'm going to show that, I'm going to bring up Atlas real quick. And Atlas is where I'm managing the schemas that come in for the different data transformations that happen as I'm bringing data in. It also looks at lineage and things like that. So here I'm going to go look at some of the data that I have. And I've got a taxi all trips table out here I can look at. And so this is a table that I've brought in a bunch of New York City taxi data. I can see the columns that are related to it. I can see who's the owner of it, when it was created, things like that. For me, coming from my experience as a consultant in large enterprises, one of the things that I like to be able to see is lineage. So I can see from this table that was created how it was transformed, all the different data that came in that eventually was transformed into this table. And then I can also see downstream or upstream from it, all the other tables that and transformations that have happened that have come from the data that sits in this table. So that was a quick on the storage side. The other thing I'll show you is from a compute side. Since this is delivered as a PaaS service, one of the things we can do is we can go and make it easier to go and deploy some of our services by doing templated compute templates. So from a data hub standpoint, if I want to go create a new data hub and say I needed to do some data ingestion with something like NiFi, I could go on here and look for a cluster definition for flow management. And I could click on it, and that's going to give me NiFi. It shows me the services that I'll be getting: NiFi Registry, and Zookeeper. I can then go and give it a name, and I'm going to just call it Chris VDF. And at the end, I can hit provision. And behind the scenes, the management plane is now going out, and it's telling it's provisioning all these resources within the subscription for me, so that in a few minutes I'll have a flow management data hub spin up where I'll have NiFi available to me. So hopefully that was a quick kind of a primer on CDP. You've seen it as a PaaS service. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it over to Jeff, and we can hear a little bit more about what Microsoft's been doing.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Thanks, Chris. Forgot to unmute you. So yeah, thanks, guy. And honestly, I wish we could just see more of that demo. I was sitting here backstage just cheering, just seeing it all kind of work together and see how how CDP on ADLS Gen 2 just works, which is fantastic. But yeah, I wanted to just quickly give a primer on the ADLS side, and then hand it over to Erik to go deeper into this and to show you guys another demo. Let me first just kind of talk about why data lake analytics, or why data lakes for analytics, excuse me. It's more about, when you think about it, like, all right, what are the tools that you have for analytics? You got data lakes, you got data warehouses. I'm not going to get into a data lake versus data warehouses, sort of debate, or sort of conversation with you right now. I'm just going to kind of focus on like why folks have been choosing data lakes for analytics. And it's number one, it's because the inherent data democratization that a data lake provides. Customers are able to ascertain better and more fruitful insights into their data, right? You have, that data democratization removes the barriers that are inherent to a data silo. And when you have silos, when you have walls, typically your insights can only span to those walls, right? And then when you want to gain insights outside of those walls, well, then you need to, create some sort of data movement ETL job or something to bring those in. Well, you don't necessarily have to do that with data lakes when you can just stick the compute on top of your mass, on top of petabytes of data, and then run a query over it. It's great. Data lakes are typically more or less expensive, not only because of the commoditized cost that are typically inherent to public cloud storage, and certainly ADLS storage is certainly low cost. ADLS is the same cost for blob storage on the volume side, and blob storage is a scalable cloud, remote cloud storage offering that we have in Azure land, and ADLS essentially builds on top of blobs to create that rich, Hadoop-like file system semantics that the Hadoop environment and Hadoop users and Hadoop workloads are expecting and are used to, right? And third is that data lakes are typically more open, right? Because again, going back to that data democratization, that means because you are democratizing the data, because you are essentially allowing this data to be accessed from whatever analytic tool or client that is needed. Now you can use whatever tool you need to get the job done, right? So now your ML, your AI and ML folks, they can go nuts on. They can use all those Python libraries and all those ML libraries they want to use, right? And then, if you're in CDP land, if you want to run, Impala or Spark workload or Synapse, if you're in Synapse, you can do it. Like, doesn't matter, right? You get a broad set of analytics frameworks and it just works. So I kind of already talked about a little bit of the analytics tools that are available in Azure, but not wouldn't be complete without showing you a little architecture. So here we are. We've got essentially what we have here in Azure Analytics. You've got Azure Synapse or Azure Synapse Analytics, which provides it's our flagship analytics product that ties the data warehousing plus the Spark and data lake capabilities. You've got Azure Databricks, which is the if you're familiar with Databricks, it's the Databricks service, but it's the native Azure experience, so you can manage everything and everything's done through your Azure portal, and it's all goodness there. We've also have Azure HD Insight, which if you want to work in a sort of managed PaaS environment, Hadoop PaaS environment, you can do so with HDI. And then of course, Cloudera CDP runs on Azure, right? The great thing is that all of these capabilities, all of these tools, plus other tools, right, that we have in Azure, they all support ADLS, right? So, so the data doesn't need to move, even though you may want to use a different tool. That's fantastic, right? So a little bit about ADLS. let me just kind of build out this slide. It's scalable. It's built on top of blob storage. It's going to have, when we think about scale, I mean, to be able to build a storage platform that all of Azure has to use, in addition to all of the customers, it has to be scalable, right? So ADLS is certainly scalable. It's certainly secure. You can trust that your data will be protected, and that will not be authorized or not be accessed by anyone who doesn't deserve it. It's certainly, we already talked a little bit about the cost aspect of that, right? Certainly low cost, and like I said, it's the solutions and the analytics platforms that run in Azure today rely on ADLS, and ADLS is that foundation. So let me shift gears a little bit. Given the nature of this meetup, I wanted to kind of dive a little bit into the security piece of this, right? Now, as I kind of hinted on, ADLS supports PaaS examples, right? ADLS is a file system. It supports file system semantics, the same ones that you're used to in an HDFS type file system world. And PaaS examples are a big part of that, right? So they provide that fine-grained access control of which you're used to. Now the thing is, these ACLs, these ACLs are going to pertain to principles that are in Azure Active Directory, right? So now you've got the notion of PaaS ACLs, which originally came from on-prem and are still heavily used in Hadoop. Now we've brought that into public cloud, into Azure land, but then we've modernized that approach by leveraging Azure Active Directory to provide that sort of unified identity management system that that you need in Azure, right, in any public cloud platform. So I already talked a little bit about the authentications done through Azure Active Directory. We got all the compliance that you can imagine. There's a site, it's listed. A quick Google search will find it for you. And the encryption side, right? So we encrypt the data. It's always encrypted. It's encrypted over the wire. It's encrypted at rest. And by default, we have the encryption, like we use encryption keys that are stored and maintained and rotated on a very, very strenuous, like a lot of the guideline, like that's part of the compliance that we have requires very strict sort of key rotation guidelines and requirements, and we have to adhere to that, so we do. But in the case for some customers, they would rather retain those keys themselves. No problem. You can bring your own key and you can manage it. No worries there. We support that. Let me dive a little bit into what kind of what we're dancing around, what we're actually talking about in this meetup. I know Erik's going to go into he's going to do a demo. He's going to go really deep in that, and I don't want to steal his thunder there. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of like a little bit more background on like what we wanted to do and why, and then like on the ADLS side, what we actually did to support this joint solution, right? So as you heard from Chris kind of discuss a little bit, is that when we set out on this joint initiative, Cloudera and Microsoft, and specifically Azure Storage, we saw a need to enable a certain type of workloads a little bit better on ADLS, right? ADLS Gen 2. And secure Hadoop workloads. Those are the ones that I'm talking about, right? When by secure Hadoop, we're talking about, ones that are secured by, Ranger or Sentry or something like that. And we wanted customers to be able, like for those, especially those customers that have already embarked or about to embark on their migration journey, we wanted to allow them to take advantage of all of the benefits that ADLS provides while not requiring them to boil the ocean and modernize everything, including the compute or workload piece of this, right? So, you can still retain that Hadoop, traditional Hadoop environment, by doing more of a lift, but yet take advantage of the economies of scale and all the benefits of ADLS. More specifically, we wanted to provide a unified interface. We wanted to support multiple users, authorization across all of the Hadoop services that are available to you in CDP. And then, for compliance reasons, we wanted to make sure that all this stuff was actually logged, and could be audited or verified across the systems, both in ADLS and in CDP land, right? And we solved this, right? We solved this with SDX, as you've been hearing so far in the talk, and you'll see a little bit more. The shared data experience really does. It works really well with ADLS, right? We collaborated on the solution because we believe it achieves the goal that I just mentioned, right? And as you'll see, the integration with CDP and AAD gives you that unified identity management system that spans traditional data center boundaries and IT boundaries, right? And for those, who have already, for those customers that you already spend so much of your resources building and maintaining processes for moving data from one silo to another. You don't need to do that anymore, right? You just stick the data in ADLS and then stick whatever compute tool, analytics tool on top of it, right? You want to hear me? I'm kind of like a broken record there. But that, basically the point I'm trying to say is that by keeping all of it in ADLS, you have the freedom to run any workload on any platform of your choosing and without having to pay the data movement tax, right? So a little bit more about, let me dive into these specific pieces of the solution on the storage side, right? We did a couple of things. One is today, if you're in a Hadoop environment and you want to interface with ADLS, you want to leverage ADLS, you need to go through a Hadoop client driver. Well, for us, that driver is called the ABFS driver, or Azure Blob File System driver. and that driver is available in Apache Hadoop today. And essentially what we did to that, and it's been available for a few years since, ever since Gen 2 has been GA'd. We revved that driver by adding an interface called SAS Token Provider, has a single method called get SAS token. And that essentially that the Cloudera's RAS component, which Erik will get into, that RAS component has implemented this interface to generate said SAS token that will work for a specific storage account, file system, path, URI path, and desired operation from the caller, right? And if all that checks out, the RAS will then create that SAS token and then return it in that get SAS token function. You can also find you can see the code for yourself. It's in the Apache Hadoop trunk. It's called SAS token provider.java. That's the source file. Now that's the one of the things that we had to address to make sure that CDP, or specifically SDX, could actually talk to and do this thing. The CDP Ranger ADLS solution. The other thing is the actual SAS token, right? We needed to update. So before I go into let me give you a quick primer on what user delegation SAS is before we tell you about the enhancements we made to it. So today in storage land, you've got two types of SAS. You have a user SAS, or user delegation SAS, and an account key SAS. The user delegation SAS is generated from a delegation key that is generated if that person or that user has the permissions to be able to generate SAS tokens on that account. So right off the bat, that's already more secure than the account level key SAS, because in the accounts SASs are generated off of the storage account key. And if you have the storage account key, you're essentially root, the root owner, and you can do anything you want to that storage account. You can even generate SAS tokens for those who may not necessarily should be allowed to access that data or perform whatever operations that SAS token specifies for that data or for that scope. So user delegation SAS is already a little bit more secure than account level SAS, and we certainly want everyone out there to opt to a user SAS over the storage account key SAS. Like outside of CDP, outside of Cloudera, that's just best practice for Azure Storage. Now that I've given you that primer, let me just kind of talk about what we've added to this. Well, the first thing we needed to do is we needed to add directory and file support to the user SaaS, right? In the first version, it met a different set of scenarios, and that scenario did not include creating SaaS tokens for an HDF, for the ADLS, file system, but now it does, right? So great. So the next is that we've added support for specific operations that we found to be very commonplace in the Hadoop environment, right? So move, execute, set owner, set permissions. Those are all data actions that are now supported in SaaS v2, if you will. The third thing is the agent ID. Now, this is an optional parameter, and when it's specified, ADLS will perform an ACL check against this ID before authorizing the operation, right? So this is actually kind of useful. For example, like if a user is trying to access data of which there's no accompanying, say, Ranger policy, and therefore we need to fall back on the Gen 2 on the underlying ACL that's already set on that Gen 2 directory or file. In order for that fallback to occur, you need to specify the agent ID, right? So we know which that ID is essentially the user ID or principal that is essentially requesting, ultimately requesting, to be able to do X on Y, right? And finally, there is an optional correlation ID. And this is also very useful because if you specify that correlation ID, then you're able to correlate the client-side logs with the Azure Storage diagnostic logs that are available in your storage account today. And if I remember correctly, that's automatically enabled in the CDP Ranger solution, right? So now in CDP Ranger, you're able to, if you need to troubleshoot or do any sort of auditing, and you need to, the correlation ID obviously helps you, merge those logs and trace things down. If you want to know more about this, we have this documented in our standard docs. It's available at that link below. Just go to aka.ms/user/SaaS, and you can read more about it and all of the specific parameters. This is very, very high level. We get into the details in the document, but didn't want to do that here. And that's it. That's all I've got, folks. So I hope that was useful, and I'll hand it over to Erik. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. That's that's a lot of good information about the mechanisms that you guys have worked on to help enable this solution. So real quick, what I'm going to run through is the Ranger Authorization Service. So RAS is what we titled that one. How it works with Microsoft Azure with some of the mechanisms that Jeff has just gone through, and then I'm gonna run you through a demo of this stuff in action, right? So CDP actually with RAS enabled. Governing control to the ADLS resources that are underneath. So what is RAS, right? So like Jeff talked about, this was developed jointly with Microsoft and Cloudera through a partnership to provide some additional functionality into Azure for these big data workloads, these Hadoop type workloads that are running out there. RAS is a service that runs within the CDP infrastructure that mitigates, and basically it sits as a middleman to provide the access control to the ADLS storage that underlies the data processing. It provides more fine-grained access controls to ADLS. So and you can manage things a lot more similarly to how you would manage your HDFS stuff on-prem through Ranger, right? You can leverage existing Ranger features like the role-based and activity-based access controls. You can delegate admin for things through Ranger to other users. So if you've got a set of containers or a set of storage accounts that you need to delegate admin to, you can hand that off to somebody else. You can segment resources and security zones. Ranger's got wildcard support, and I can show you a policy that implements a wildcard for providing access. And then you get to do all this stuff through the Ranger admin UI. So folks coming from an HDP on-prem that have used Ranger, CDP in the cloud is going to look very, very familiar to you, and you're going to manage that storage access very similarly to how you would on-prem. And the other benefit is you get a full audit trail for these ADLS accesses through the Ranger UI, and I'll show you that stuff as well. So a little bit of the RAS architecture, where things sit here. So over here, you can see the RAS service sitting in the compute plane, right? So that's a service that sits in the compute plane. It interacts with the control plane for user identity information. And that user identity comes from your identity provider. So your Azure Active Directory, maybe your ADLS, Okta provider, something like that. We can integrate with those as an identity provider and pass that identity through. So RAS understands how to build these SaaS tokens that Jeff was mentioning to hand back to the user for access to the storage. So in order to make all of this work, what we do is we use this DSAS token that Jeff mentioned. So this user delegation shared access signature. So basically, this is a ticket to ride for accessing a storage resource, right? If you've got this SaaS token, you can go access that storage resource, whether it's a container, a directory, or a particular file within a directory. This DSAS allows a user, and in our case, we call it the RAS identity, managed identity in Azure, to delegate access out to those storage resources. So RAS has the ability to do all of these things on that storage resource, and it's delegating them out based on what Ranger says that users are allowed to do. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we chose to go this route, right? So it provides some additional security. I'll talk in the next slide about what we have to specify to create this DSAS token to hand back to the user, but we're able to narrow the scope of access, right? So we can get as fine-grained as limiting this to a specific object that's sitting in ADLS, and we can time-bound that. We can say that this ticket's only good for the next 10 minutes or the next hour or something like that. And that means that you don't need to pass user credentials in your application code, right? So if you're writing a Spark job, you don't have to code into your Python, here's my Azure credentials to go access this storage to get the files I want to work on. I'm just going to let RAS manage that for me and set my policies in Ranger. And scalability becomes an issue too, because if you're not using this kind of fine-grained access signature, then what you have to do is you have to manage a large number of users and groups, managed identities, roles, and things like that in Azure, and assign users to those based on what they're allowed to access. So the DSAS allows you to get a lot more fine-grained and to scale out a lot further than you could effectively do with that large number of groups and roles and stuff. So when we create this DSAS token, basically what we're saying is the RAS user can create this token and hand it out to a user. So we're giving them that permission to be able to do that. And we have to specify a few things in this DSAS token that we generate. And so I wanted to call out a few of the more important ones here. First off is the sign permission. So this is what we are allowing the user to do. And this user could have, outside of the context of CDP and RAS, this user could have zero access to this storage resource, but we can hand them that permission through this DSAS token. And we're going to say what that user is allowed to do by specifying the sign permission. So they might be able to read it only. They might be able to read or write it. They might be able to delete it. They might be able to list it. There's several different things that they could do that we're going to specify in that token. We're going to specify a start and end date and time. So that gives us the time bound on when this token is going to be valid. And then we're going to specify the user object ID. So this user could be an authorized user, or it could be an unauthorized user. So if we're specifying it as an authorized user, that's saying that RAS has validated this user and they are allowed to do these things on this resource. And so that DSAS token, when the user goes to the Azure storage layer, it just says, okay, here are the signed permissions. I'm going to trust that the RAS user who signed this knows what he's doing, and I'm going to allow that user to do those things to that storage resource. One of the other features that we're working on right now is the ability to hand this down to those ADLS POSIX ACLs that Jeff mentioned, right? And so what we would do there is, in a situation where you can configure RAS in two different ways. So if there's not a policy governing it, you can set RAS to deny by default, right? That's kind of the default configuration. With this new feature, what you'll be able to do is say, no, RAS, I still want you to create a SaaS token for that user, but I want you to specify that they're an unauthorized user, so that when they hand that token to the Azure storage layer, then it's going to use the ACLs that exist on those directories and objects to determine what that user is allowed to do, right? So it's kind of a pass-through authorization functionality. So those are kind of the important things that we have to specify when we create this DSaaS token on that particular object. Now, in order to do that, the RAS identity, so this is a managed identity that we create, so similar to what Chris showed you in the first demo with some of the managed identities that we've got assigned to do particular things in your account. The RAS identity needs to have permissions on the storage accounts to be able to create these DSaaS tokens and be able to specify certain actions that users can do. So the first one, obviously, is the action to be able to generate a user delegation key. If I can't generate the user delegation key, I can't create this DSaaS token and give it to another user to access the storage. And then there are several data actions that we need to be able to have. So manage ownership, modify permissions on an object. So because RAS is going to be specifying that a user can read, write, delete, or move a particular object, then RAS has to have the ability to do those things on that object, right? So it can't hand out permissions that it doesn't have on your storage account. Now, if you look at this, this trims down a lot of the potential permissions that you could have to give to the RAS identity to make this work, right? So we're restricting this down to just the pieces that we need. So then I want to talk about the communication flow, right? So what does this look like in action when we're doing this? So when RAS starts up, it's going to go out and talk to the Azure storage layer to generate user delegation keys that it's going to use to sign those SaaS tokens, right? So it's going to go get all the ones for the storage accounts that it knows about, and it's going to cache those on startup. So when a user then requests access to an ADLS object through RAS, the first thing it's going to do is go check with Ranger, and it's going to say, hey, Ranger, is this user allowed to read or write or delete or whatever this particular object, right? And so Ranger is going to have a set of policies, and it'll say, yes, the user is authorized, or no, the user is not authorized. If the user is not authorized, then it's going to say, hey, you know what? I can't build your SaaS token because you're not authorized, and it's going to return an error. If the user is authorized, then RAS is going to build that SaaS token for the user, specifying what they're allowed to do on what object, how long it's valid, and it's going to put their OID in there as well. And then it's going to return that SaaS token to the end user. The end user is then going to take that SaaS token and talk to the Azure storage layer, presenting that token, and it's going to get back the ADLS object that it's asking for, right? All right, so let me kick out now into a demo and show you this stuff in action here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a script or two here. So this file just lists out what's out in our directories right now, right? So I've got a storage account out here with a couple of containers. So if I just run this, you'll see that there's nothing in here. And then I've got another script that I'm going to run that will actually load some stuff up into these so that we can play with them, right? And then this is my load files, right? I'm just going to put some of these files out here that into our ABFS location, right? Into Azure. So while that runs, let me show you some of the policies that we've got in place here and what is governing our ability to be able to do this right now. So this is your Ranger resource-based policies, right? And so I'm going to go into my ADLS policies here. And I've got several policies for this RAS test for the containers and whatnot that are in here. So the one that's enabled right now is this all containers one. So if I take a look at this, what this one is doing is it's saying on this Maxwell RAS test storage account, all of the storage containers, I'm able to read, write, execute, delete, basically do anything that I want to any of those storage accounts. So that's going to allow me to run this load files script to put stuff out into those ADFS or ADLS storage containers. So if we look at this again, we'll see that we've got several files out here now, right? So we've got 3 files here in our data container, and we've got 5 files here in our logs container. So I was able to actually write files out there and then do a listing on those to see what's in there. Well, you know what? I don't like Maxwell being able to do that anymore. So I'm going to disable this policy, and then I'm going to save this. And basically, I'm going to take away all of the access out here that he has on any containers within that storage account. Now, in my audit trail here, I'm going to be able to see the things that were done already, right? And we can see that the result was allowed. I can also check my plugin status, and I can see if my policies have synced recently. So it's 4:48 my time here, so I can see that this has synchronized. I can refresh this again, and you can see that I've synchronized my new RAS policies out there. So let me go try to access this stuff again now, and just do an LS files here. Let's see what happens. So since I took away all permissions, what do we think is going to happen here? Well, I'm getting error messages here that I failed to acquire a SaaS token because permission denied, right? So this is the case where I have no access. And I told you that it would return an error message in the communication flow if it couldn't generate a SaaS token because I wasn't authorized in Ranger. Well, this is that error message that you would see. Was not able to authorize you, basically. And now if I look at my audit trail again here, I will be able to see, as soon as it refreshes, that I've got 2 denied access here, right, where I was trying to do an LS on the logs. Oops, sorry. Trying to do an LS on the logs container and an LS on the data container, and it denied it, right? And the access enforcer was the Ranger ACL. So it basically said that since there was nothing that governed my access to those, I was not able to do anything, and it denied me access and gave me that error message. So I can go back and play with my policies now, and I can change my accesses again. I can change things up a little bit, and we'll be able to see some different behaviors. So I've got a test data container one out here, right? So the data container in that RAS test storage account, I want to go ahead and give myself access back to the data container. So I'm going to enable this one. Then what I'm also going to do is for the logs container, I only want my user to be able to read, right? So I can read and list permissions on the logs container within this storage account. And so now if I save this one, now I'm back to being able to do stuff again, right? So I should be able to at least do a listing on my logs container and look at some of the log files that I've got in there. So let's just grab one of these commands here. So this is my logs container. I got an error message before. Policies haven't synced yet, so sometimes it takes a couple of seconds. There we go. So now that the policies have synced, I'm able to list these. I'm able to list this location again. So what's going to happen now if I try to do a delete on one of these files, right? Because I've only got read access here, I should get an error message back saying it couldn't generate a SAS token because permission is denied, right? And that's exactly what we get. So we see the permission denied there. Now, if I want to try and remove one of the files in my other container, in my data container, say I want to get rid of this no test, not a test.txt file, I was able to do that because I had full permissions on the data container here, right? So as you can see, we can get more prescriptive on what we can do. This is at the container level. What I can also do is, I've got some other policies out here that I can show you, is I can go all the way down to the object level, right? So this test1 policy is on the /test1.txt file, right? It's the only thing, so that's the only file that this is going to give me access to, and it's going to give me read and list access. So I can restrict access all the way down to the file level. What I can also do, we talked about Ranger features like wildcard support. I can create a policy that says I can do things on test star, right? So I've got a test1 file and a test2 file out there. This policy, if I enable this and then disable my other policy that gives me full access, what I'll be able to do is list those two files and cat those two files, but that's it, right? I won't be able to do anything else in that, within that container. So it's in my data container. Let's disable this one. Save that. Go back and check our plugin status again. What's the time? Looks like it's pretty fresh synced up. Okay. So now what I can do is, where did my files go? So if I wanted to try and remove this text file, guess what? I'm not going to be able to. Right? Because I can't get the SAS token. What I can do, though, is I can cat this file. And I can cat the test2 file. Right? So those both work because those are both governed by those policies. What I can't do, though, because I don't have the permissions anymore, is I cannot list out what's in this container. It's not going to let me, oops, shoot. Darn funny characters on the end there. Try that the right way. So I can't even list out the container anymore because all I've got is read and list permissions on those particular files, right? So you can get very, very, very prescriptive about what a user can and can't do within your ADLS storage. And then I can come back here and look at my audit trail again. And I can see all of those access denieds, right? Over here under the policy ID, I see that there's a dash dash. That means there is no policy governing things, so I denied by default. And then I can also see what policy was it that allowed this user to read this particular piece of data. So policy number 67 is the one that governs it. It's my test star policy. It's the Maxwell user has got read and list on that, etc. Right? So you get a lot of information here now around your ADLS storage. You can get very prescriptive, very fine-grained, using that DSAS token to allow permissions for only a certain period of time on the specific object that the user is trying to access. Okay. So that's my demo and my description of Ranger RAS. So now you got an idea of what RAS is, what it was designed for, how you would use it in Ranger, how you can audit that stuff in the Ranger audit trail, and then what it looks like as you're trying to access that stuff from the command line, right? So that's all I've got. So I think we were tracking questions on the social media. So Chris, do we have any questions that we can answer for folks?
Yeah, we do. One of the neat things, as you were doing your demo, one of the things that kind of popped up into my head, I kind of think back to a blog post that one of our founders, Arun Murthy, put out talking about our journey to CDP and the journey to embrace and become, more the cloud architectures that are out there. And what's neat about a lot of what you showed here today is that by moving in this direction, we used to, when we thought about our platform, I thought about Cloudera, thought about Hadoop, a lot of it was about HDFS and about having to manage all those nodes out there running HDFS for the file system. Yeah. Now, since we've gone to object storage and we've gone to this separating compute from storage, we're embracing object storage, and now storage just becomes a service out there that we leverage. And that storage now, our customers, our users, don't have to think about balancing nodes out and how many nodes they need for this much storage. It's just a platform service that they leverage off of from Microsoft.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Chris. We've done a lot of work to separate the compute from the storage, so we can use things like Microsoft ADLS as a storage as a service, right? So yes, you can put all your files out there. We can process them in any way that you want to, but we don't care about where it's stored anymore, right? That's just data access. And so folks like Microsoft can, they, like Jeff and his team, can make the storage better as a storage layer, and we don't have to worry about that. We interact with it as to get the data.
Exactly. You just pay for what you use. You don't worry about replication factor, any of that. You just throw your data up there and do your work. Cool. All right. So yeah, we do. We've got a few questions out there. Let me start to kind of jump through them. First of them, Josh X. How much does CDP rely on HDFS and attached storage? So Erik, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So the answer is a little bit, but not much. And it also depends on what services that you're using. So we do have to have a little bit of attached storage for certain things, like thrash space for certain jobs. We do still use a little bit of attached storage. If you're using operational database, HBase, stuff like that, we put the write-ahead logs onto local storage because we need those to be very, very, very performant, right? Very fast reads, very fast writes. But the H files then would live out in ADLS. Okay. Right? So again, minimal, but a little bit still for local storage.
Okay, awesome. The next one is K162NYC. How do services like Hive gain access to storage through RAS? I think, Erik, that might be another one with you.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, what we do is in Ranger, there are a set of policies, and if you're for on-prem clusters, you're probably familiar with this already. So where Hive is going to store its data, that we give it access to that storage location. We do the same thing with RAS, right? So if your Hive stores are on ADLS storage, then we give the Hive user access to those storage accounts and containers. And then RAS would authorize the Hive user the same as it would in an on-prem cluster to gain access to those. And so it would create that DSAS token for the Hive user to go access the files that it needs to pull off to satisfy queries.
Very good. Very good. Okay, next one from Mads1113. What is next, or what's coming next with ADLS storage? So I guess, hey, so Jeff, next quarter, what do we got? Is there any good things coming, additional things to ADLS storage?
Yeah, there's a lot of great things coming. Sign an NDA and I'll tell you. Yeah. there's a lot of good stuff that's coming. That's also come. Look forward to some of the we'll be making probably a few more announcements here. As certainly as the summer conference season is upon us.
All right.
Just stay tuned. Just
all right.
Continue to look at the Azure blog, or the Azure update service, to get the latest.
Very good. Okay, great. Next would be from MC Cat. What are some key features that would have a CDP customer choose Azure over another cloud? And I guess I can kind of jump into that. That's one of the beauties of the way the CDP platform's been delivered. First, it's the platform service should be pretty similar across all the different cloud experiences. One of the great things about CDP on Azure, though, is what we're showing today, the RAS, and which makes the migration from on-prem to the cloud so much easier. Because you're able to use those same ACLs as you're going for the controls as you're going from on-prem to the cloud. It's a very similar path going up.
Yeah. If I could jump into that, yeah. I mean, I would say number one, Azure has Azure Active Directory, yes. Right. That right there is a differentiator, because now you've got a unified identity management system that is ubiquitous across all of Azure. So great. Now we have a unified, and that's on the control plane. So what I mean by control plane, I'm talking about the actual Azure resources that, you need to manage and deploy and all that stuff. And then on the data plane, so in the underlying, the actual data, the user data and all that is all managed through the same sort of identity management system. Additionally, especially those that, already have, an on-prem, Hadoop install or any install, I suppose. You've got your own LDAP solution, right? Or you have an LDAP solution, right? Or in 99.9% of them is Active Directory. Well, great. So now and AAD has a solution called AAD Connect that allows the automatic synchronization of the on-prem AD tenants to the directories, if you will, and with the AAD tenants, which is even better. Yeah. And then you don't get that in AWS, right? Or sorry, I can't say that, but I mean you don't get that with the other clouds, right?
Right.
That's right. Is the integrated identity management that now that CDP is able to leverage seamlessly for the customer, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's Azure Active Directory is a great thing to point out there. I know we've had a few weeks ago I had a customer that wanted to integrate CDP with their Azure Active Directory, and we had them up and going in less than 15 minutes. Had it integrated and running, and so their same identity provider, their same single sign-on that they're using to get to their email, to get to other applications, they can use that same identity when they're working with CDP.
That's right.
Great point.
Yeah, and then on the engineering side, we had to sort this out, right? Because in the secure Hadoop land, what do you have? You got Kerberos.
Yeah.
But we're not going to launch Kerberos in Azure when we have AAD. So then it's well, how do you get something like Kerberos to work in an environment that doesn't know, or how do you get AAD and OAuth to work in an environment that expect like a Hadoop environment that would expect Kerberos, right? And and so that I think that what we came up with the user SaaS and the RAS and having using the RAS as a proxy, and then falling back to ACLs, if there's no Ranger policy or should a policy not exist, and so on and so forth. I think it's a good sweet spot, right? Certainly for customers that need to stay in a CDP environment, in a traditional Hadoop environment in Azure.
Great points. All right, we've got another question out here, and actually it was retracted, but I think Salim Sheikh had a really good point here that I'm going to kind of turn around a little bit. And he asked, what all tools does Azure AD or does ADLS support? And I think it's important for a different way to say it for us. So Erik, within CDP, what all services within CDP support ADLS Gen 2 today?
All of them.
Yeah, that's the great point. You're not thinking about, again, you're not thinking about attached storage on these VMs anymore. We do have a little bit, a tiny bit on some, of attached storage, but it's really more from it's really more from an application point of view, not user data. The user data is leveraging ADLS Gen 2, and that's a great thing there. Yeah. All right,
and then storage is like temporary storage, thrash. I think Erik, you called it thrash. You know, it's basically like you need a swap space or something. Great, like why would you? I mean, you don't want to take a huge trip all the way across the net. Huge trip. But when it's like swap space, you need low latency, like you say, right ahead logs and stuff. That stuff adds up, right? So attached storage totally makes sense there. It's not persisted. Doesn't need to be. The persisted data stays in ADLS. Yeah.
Oh, very good. All right, so final question, MC Cat again. If you got self-disabling policies in Ranger, how is it solved? I think, did I read that right? If you've got self-disabling policies in Ranger, how does it get solved? So I guess if you've got, Erik, can I have to help me with this a little bit?
I was going to ask for some help myself. Self-disabling policies.
Well, I think if they've got
IAM policies.
IAM policies. I think if there's something that's, I mean, how do we resolve if there's multiple? If there's a policy for a certain group that can't access a file, and a user's part of one group that can access it and one that can't access it. How does that get resolved in the end?
Yeah, so
that's where it's going.
So when it comes to Ranger policy, basically the evaluation of who's allowed to do what, the first thing that gets resolved is explicit denies, right? So in Ranger, you can say I'm explicitly allowing a user to do something, or I'm explicitly denying a user to do something. So what we resolve first are the explicit denies. So if a user is explicitly denied, boom, it short circuits and they don't get to do anything. If we don't find a relevant deny policy, then we go on to the allow policies. When we find a relevant allow policy, then it gets evaluated. And if the user is allowed to do something with that policy, then they would be allowed, right? If there are multiple policies that govern a particular resource, right, then it can get a little more tricky. But basically, if the user is allowed by any policy to access that resource, then that user would be allowed to access that resource. Now, if the user is allowed by a policy you didn't intend, but they're explicitly denied in a different policy, then they would obviously be denied access to that resource.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Good. All right. So I think so far that's the last question that we have today. So now we can move on. From a resources standpoint, there's a few things that we would like you to take away with you. First, if you haven't done it yet and want to spin it up, we do have a quick start on Azure, which gives you an ARM template and the steps to go through to spin up a CDP environment on Azure. So the link's there for you. Also, we've got there's a blog post related to our access controls for Azure ADLS Cloud Object Storage. You can also see some videos from our users on how they're using CDP at cloudera.com/users. And finally, we've got two other things. We've got the Cloudera video tour and the next future of data meetup page. Before we do that, hold on. There was one more thing that came through, another question. I just want to hit it before we're done, from Shantanu Singh. Though CDP is powerful and versatile enough for enterprise, when we compare it to existing cloud player like EMR or more services for EMR and AWS, what overpowers or certain features? What are the key features of CDP on the cloud? So, and I'll jump in. I think Erik, you might be able to pop in with a little bit about CDP versus some other services. The thing about CDP is, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's CDP is an end-to-end platform. So everything from data ingestion, data engineering, data warehouse, all the way through to the operational DB and machine learning. It's a complete platform across the whole thing. Other services usually take a siloed approach, and they may be for one of those key workloads. But with CDP, we're really we're pushing to go across all those workloads, and then underneath it all, we've got that shared data experience. And I think that's that key differentiator when you're looking at it. When you want to have an enterprise data cloud and you want to be able to go across all those workloads, CDP is able to do that, and you don't have to do all of that plumbing to integrate across all those services.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. So the SDX layer is one of the key differentiators in my mind, because it allows you to have multiple workload clusters or multiple workloads that are all glued together by unified security of your data, unified governance of your data with a unified data catalog, et cetera, right? So it really kind of glues everything together. So it doesn't matter whether you're running queries against relational style data, running data loading jobs with Spark or whatnot, right? It all gets glued together by that SDX layer. And that's one of the key differentiators that we bring to the table with that end-to-end platform. It's just sticking everything together.
Oh, very good, very good. All right, well, okay, so let's flip ahead a little bit and talk about, with Cloudera, we've got these future of data meetups. We regularly have these, and our next meetup will be titled Hello Kafka, an introduction to Apache Kafka. That's going to take place on Thursday, July 15th from 6 to 7:30. And we've got the link there for you. We'd love to have you all come out to that. And, please just, keep an eye out on that. We have every few weeks, we try to do one of these future of data meetups. And we also have, at one of the other links I didn't give you earlier is Try CDP. If you want a quick test drive, go to trycdp.com and you'll be able to do sign up for a quick test drive of CDP. All right, now jumping over to it's the fun time. It's time to do the raffle. And we got everybody's name in the hopper. Let's go ahead and start to choose our winners. All right, first winner is K162 NYC. It'll be our first place winner. And the second place will be Salim Sheikh. Hey, congratulations to everybody. Please, you need to email, and I'm bad, I forgot the name of the email address. Please, when it's time to, when you want to get, for those that want to claim your prizes, please go to social media or email socialmedia@cloudera.com to claim your prize. And with that, this concludes our meetup. I'd like to thank my other panelists here today. And it's been a great time. Please come back and see us again. Have a good day. Bye-bye.